اما یه پا دافتندم پا کردن نمیدونم چیه این یا یه پهواد بود درسته؟ یه پهواده.
What you just saw was footage of an Israeli drone strike against an Iranian defense facility. So Common Dreams did some really good reporting on this. So here's some more details from them. Unnamed US officials on Sunday confirmed suspicions that Israel was behind the weekend drone attack on a purported military facility in the Iranian city of Isfahan. Heightened concerns that the far-right government of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is gearing up for a broader assault on Iran as international nuclear talks remain at a standstill. So the New York Times reported that the drone attack, which Iran says it mostly thwarted, was, quote, the work of the Mossad, Israel's premier intelligence agency, according to senior intelligence officials who were familiar with the dialogue between Israel and the United States about the incident. So Jamal Abdi, who is the president of the National Iranian American Council, expressed deep concerns about this attack. So what he had to say was, this attack, or this latest act of sabotage conducted via military attack inside Iran is a dangerous escalation and should be cause for concern for everyone who opposes war. War will only further empower the most violent and repressive forces inside Iran at the expense of ordinary Iranians demanding freedom, and will embolden reactionary elements in Iran, Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the United States. And that's a tale we've seen many times with the United States military intervention, particularly in the Middle East. So Jamal's absolutely right. And meanwhile, in Pakistan, tragedy has rocked the nation. And I just want to give a heads up here that some of this footage is going to be tough to watch.
This is the aftermath of a suicide bombing at a crowded mosque in Pakistan's Peshawar. More than 40 people died in the attack on Monday, according to city officials, in the latest violence targeting police in the northwestern city. Hospital officials said scores were wounded, with many of them in a critical condition. A police official said that there were at least 260 people in the mosque when the explosion happened.
A Pakistan Taliban group has taken responsibility. From the Washington Post, the blast, one of the deadliest terror attacks ever on Pakistani forces, was claimed by two officials of the Pakistani Taliban, an extremist militia that has waged war between the government for years and recently broke off a truce that had been negotiated last summer. It has a close alliance with the Afghan Taliban, now ruling Afghanistan, but operates independently. So we just talked about the warning from Jamal about how war causes the most extremist organizations within a country to gain power and act with impunity. And I think there's no better example than that than the Taliban. I also want to remind everybody that former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who is currently enjoying his book tour and not in prison, shockingly, helped increase recent destabilization in this region. So from Slate, like many other Republicans who now profess anguish over the Taliban's victory, Pompeo supported the United States withdrawal, but he didn't just endorse the pullout, he directed it. He cut a deal with the Taliban to remove all American troops and to release Taliban fighters from Afghan prisons. He vouched for the Taliban's assurances, even as the insurgents stage hundreds of deadly attacks. So this is what we would call failed diplomacy. Putting faith in a terrorist organization is not diplomacy. Obviously, it is utter chaos. But with the conflict between Israel and Palestine growing, and now Israel throwing a strike onto Iran in the mix and terrorist attacks on the rise, it would be wise for the Biden administration to jump into action and lead the discussion on actual diplomacy. Military action is not diplomacy. The US has had no problem intervening in these regions with tanks and weapons of war. So it's time to come at it with a different approach. Sit down with the sound minds and try to find a resolution instead of sending more military efforts, because the United States has a strong relationship with Israel. And what this is indicating is an impending war with Iran, between Israel and Iran, and the strong relationship the United States has with Israel and the not so strong relationship it has with Iran leads people to believe reasonably that the United States would get involved in a war in some capacity if it does come to that, which it's highly likely now that it will. Jessica, diplomacy is not happening.
The timing could not be worse for Jordan Peterson. Mr. Kermit the Frog has said that Donald Trump should have won a Nobel Peace Prize because of the Abraham Accords, which led to formal diplomatic relations with Israel and the recognition of Israel and many countries in the Middle East, fundamentally reframing their idea of Iran as a threat, which does not make them an ally of the United States to some degree. It does when we think about how things are shaping up in the Middle East today. What's interesting is you have an uprising of citizens in Iran that are demanding, a new constitution, a new government, an uprising of citizens in Israel as well, demanding a new government, denouncing Netanyahu. And so it's interesting that countries can be at war with each other, and it's really at the end of the day, just their military, state departments, and intelligence agencies, with the general public not consenting to the war whatsoever, not to mention the Taliban. Were the Mujahideen. They're the modern, iteration of the Mujahideen, which was trained and armed by the CIA. And so many of the problems that the United States is facing in the Middle East, and so much of the violence in the Middle East in general, is caused by the United States intervening in things that they have no business intervening in.
Absolutely. And of course, the United States has not exactly allied itself with, the most reasonable nations. I mean, for the love of God, Israel's one of our strongest allies. And it's a country that is currently enforcing an apartheid system and, has the largest open air prison of the Palestinian people. So we'll keep an eye out on this, continue to urge for diplomacy and not military action.